Imagine working your whole life to be one of the best in your sport. Then suddenly, the rulebook changes against you. That's exactly what's happening in NASCAR, and Jeff Gordon isn't staying silent. He just exposed what many believe is a direct attack on Kyle Larson, and NASCAR fans are outraged. Kyle Larson had one of the most ambitious plans in modern racing, pulling off the Indy 500 Coca-Cola 600 double. The idea? Compete in two of the biggest races on the same day, proving himself as one of the best drivers across multiple disciplines. With backing from HendrickCars.com and McLaren, Larson's dream was coming to life. At the Indianapolis 500, Larson put on an impressive show. But just as things were looking up, disaster struck. A speeding penalty in the pits sent him down the order. Instead of fighting for a top spot, he finished 18th. Still, his focus was on getting to Charlotte in time for the Coca-Cola 600. The rain delays at the Indy 500 were the biggest setback. Larson sat there watching the clock tick, 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 knowing every minute meant a greater risk of missing the next race. By the time he got to Charlotte, it was already too late. His car sat ready but was viewed from the other side of the fence. By forces beyond his control, he caught a chance that came once in a lifetime. Under normal NASCAR rules, missing a race would mean automatic disqualification from playoff contention. But Hendrick Motorsports knew Larson deserved a chance. They requested a waiver from NASCAR, arguing that the weather delay was out of his hands. NASCAR took a full week to decide. The motorsports world held its breath. Finally, the ruling came in. Larson was granted the waiver. But while the decision seemed fair, it sparked a firestorm of controversy. Some argued Larson got special treatment. Others said NASCAR had no choice. It wasn't his fault. But behind the scenes, something even bigger was brewing. NASCAR didn't just let this slide. Instead, they changed the rulebook. And what they did next sent shockwaves through the sport. Jeff Gordon saw it coming, and now he's calling them out. NASCAR has long set itself apart with its traditions, but after the Kyle Larson waiver controversy, officials made a decision that shocked just about everyone in the racing community. NASCAR promulgated a new rule for 2025 that many believe is a direct attack on Larson's 2024 double attempt. From here onwards, the rule will make it virtually impossible for future drivers to compete in both the Indy 500 and Coca-Cola 600. Dubbed the Kyle Larson Rule, the new regulation states that any driver who fails to start a NASCAR Cup race for any reason other than injury will not be eligible for a waiver. In other words, if a driver chooses to race in the Indy 500 and something, like weather, prevents them from making it to Charlotte, their entire NASCAR playoff hopes could be destroyed. It was not just Kyle Larson who suffered this change. It was a signal-clear indication from the NASCAR moment that it does not want the best drivers leaving for another series, and increasingly not even for one race. Officials would have framed it as fairness by itself, but many saw it really for what was an all-out attack against drivers who dared seek greatness outside of NASCAR. Here is someone sure to open his mouth about that. Jeff Gordon. As vice chairman of Hendrick Motorsports, Gordon is one of the most respected figures in NASCAR, and he certainly has a reputation for being a fierce advocate for drivers who push the envelope. And he didn't hold back when NASCAR announced the rule change. Gordon immediately voiced his displeasure, noting that the decision was a major step backward for the sport. According to him, NASCAR was wrong in repudiating the quest by their drivers for wider horizons on which they and the sport would climb higher. He kept it simple. What Kyle Larson did wasn't bad for NASCAR, it was good for NASCAR. The buzz around his Indy 500 attempt put NASCAR in the spotlight, bringing in new fans and showing that stock car drivers could race in the world's biggest motor racing events. Instead of nurturing that goodwill, NASCAR slammed the door on future ambitions. Gordon was not the only one who spoke up. Fans and analysts and even former drivers all chastised this rule as short-sighted and a move that punishes ambition. Some even speculated that NASCAR might be somewhat afraid, worried that if more drivers took on the Indy 500 challenge, It might help to open their eyes to just how much bigger the racing world is outside NASCAR. Jeff Gordon laid out his case clearly. Slashing growth. The more NASCAR prohibits its drivers, the less capacity it has to attract new fans. The Indy 500 is one of the biggest racing events on the planet, and when NASCAR drivers compete, it elevates the brand worldwide. It kills an iconic racing tradition. Racing legends like Tony Stewart, Kurt Busch, and Robbie Gordon all attempted the double of the Indy 500 and Coca-Cola 600. No, under this rule, it's unlikely that anyone will even try again. It's unfair to drivers. NASCAR claims to support its drivers, yet this rule actively punishes those who want to challenge themselves. Instead of making racing history, drivers now have to choose between their dreams and their playoff chances. Gordon made it clear, this isn't just about Kyle Larson. This is about the future of NASCAR. And if NASCAR keeps making decisions like this, it might find itself losing more than just a few ambitious drivers. It might start losing fans too. At first glance, NASCAR's 2025 rule change might seem like just another regulation tweak, but the impact goes far beyond Kyle Larson. This decision has sparked a much larger debate about NASCAR's priorities, control over drivers, and the sport's long-term future. By effectively blocking drivers from competing in major non-NASCAR events, the rule sends a clear message. NASCAR wants total loyalty from its stars. But that kind of restrictive thinking could backfire. Fans love seeing drivers test their skills across different racing disciplines. When NASCAR legends like Tony Stewart or Kurt Busch took on the Indy 500, it created crossover appeal, new storylines, and more excitement for the sport as a whole. Now, with NASCAR shutting that door, it risks becoming even more isolated from the broader motorsports world. Instead of encouraging drivers to elevate their status, NASCAR seems to be telling them, stay in your lane or risk losing everything. An additional aspect of NASCAR inconsistency is the treatment of waivers and exemptions. They have now ruled that missing a race for a reason other than injury is disqualifying a driver from the playoffs. But there is still an area of gray, particularly concerning the new open exemption provisional rule just made by NASCAR. This rule was quietly unveiled to coincide with the waiver change, giving NASCAR the power to grant exemptions on a case-by-case basis, effectively placing playoff eligibility decisions solely in NASCAR's hands. This opens up a big question. If NASCAR can still pick and choose who gets a waiver, is this rule really about fairness or just about control? Fans and analysts fear this new structure would only provide partiality in enforcement, and NASCAR now has the power to deny or give waivers on a case-by-case basis, leading to possible controversy in the future over its bias or lack thereof. At the heart of all this is a much larger issue. Where is NASCAR heading? Many fans and insiders believe the sport has been making one bad decision after another, from questionable rule changes to playoff format controversies. Instead of focusing on making racing more competitive and exciting, NASCAR seems obsessed with tightening its grip on drivers and protecting its interests. That Jeff Gordon would speak out against most things reflects just an increasing frustration on the part of old-time NASCAR fans. If it continues restricting its stars and making short-sighted decisions, the sport may soon have its other problem, not just drivers but fans as well. At this point, NASCAR has a choice. Does it want to grow the sport or control it to death? Kyle Larson is not the only subject to this rule change. It brings into purpose the future of the sport itself. By restricting drivers and controlling exemptions, one will risk burning the bridges between the stars and the sport down to the funding fans. Jeff Gordon, with his firm opposition, is only highlighting a greater question than what NASCAR's doing. Is it progressing, or is it tightening its grip? What do you think? Is NASCAR making a smart move or a huge mistake? Let us know in the comments. And if you enjoyed this breakdown, hit that like button and subscribe for more deep dives into the biggest stories in motorsports.